A single blast from a mighty horn signaled the start of the ceremonies. 60 ready warriors grabbed their swords and headed for the open field. Many were already making pacts and alliances in hopes of making it to the last few and impressing the tournament host, Verric Uros. "Fools!" Dickon observed. "Verric isn't looking for winners. He's looking for the right warriors. Intelligence, cunning, strength, ability with the sword is just one piece of the puzzle. Team yourself up and you stand out less." Edrik's response was something between a snort and a laugh. "Too complicated for me. I'm just gonna kill Redfield. It looks like the bastard's brought ankle biters." Sure enough, a dozen knights had gathered around Lyonel, looking in awe at the gallant knight in his gleaming armour. Dickon could see Edrik's eyes narrow. "I'll break them all in half before the day is done." As the competitors entered the arena, spectators streamed onto the balconies and each dais above to watch the spectacle. Dickon watched them flood the stands with a smile on his face. He turned to his friend and nudged him with the hilt of his sword. "I bet I can take out more than you." "With that little toothpick in your hand?" Edrik guffawed. He returned Dickon's nudge with the end of his massive war club. The weapon was made from the leg bone of a dragon, which had been filled with iron and coated in black lacquer. The dragon from whence it came was the very same Edrik had slain to earn his nickname, Dragonbane. Dickon could scarcely lift the monstrosity. When he had finished laughing, Edrik continued, "This is a weapon. That little thing can eliminate more knights than my hammer. I'll buy you one of those tavern winches so you can finally become a man." "Something tells me if you go back to the 7th River, it will be the second time you make a fool of yourself today," Dickon replied coolly, smiling as he lowered his visor over his face. The stands were crowded. Masses of common folk and nobility were separated only by their positions in the stands. A swell of noise announced the arrival of the high party, and Dickon could see the noblemen begin to enter the grounds and ascend the steps to the towering pavilion. Adorned with a gray bear of House Uros, the banners flying above the seat whipped in the wind. Verric Uros himself appeared from the rear of the high party and placed himself in that seat. The steward of the games appeared behind a great horn, which carried his voice above the din of the spectators and competitors.
"Seven blessings, young and old," he boomed. "Today we gather in the sight of the seven, and in the name of the warrior, to find the greatest of his champions."
A roar of approval from the crowd was met with a cry of strength from the warriors assembled at the base of the tower.
"The winners of the tournament will be afforded the opportunity to accompany Sir Verric Uros on his quest to conquer the lands beyond the narrow sea for the glory of the seven. The games will consist of 3 competitions, a melee fought in the style of the barbarians of the West, a grand joust in the custom of the greatest kingdom in the history of the world, and finally, a battle by 7, as is the holy tradition. May the warrior grant you all strength. Let the tournament begin."
A great horn sounded, and there was a shout from the warriors that shook the very ground. The melee began, and the crowd swelled with noise. Young Titus Blackheart stood by the pavilion. A mare, black as night, lightly pounded the ground with her hoof, waiting for the boy to finish brushing her coat. Titus was fixated on the competition. He was the 7th son of Lord Blackheart, yet he may have been the most promising offspring of the great lord. Titus was quick, clever, and brave. Though he was only a boy of 10, he was gifted with a sword and showed the promise of a true knight if he could ever become a squire. Lord Blackheart had promised to bargain with a good knight, but the opportunity had yet to present itself. Titus had been patient, yet he longed to squire for a great knight and one day fight in a tournament like this. He had never seen a battle before, and the roar of the knights in the tournament had completely captured his attention. The black mare nuzzled his cheek impatiently and brought him back to the moment. He quickly set to brushing the horse, stealing a glance at the battle and longing for the opportunity to serve a knight in combat. Movement to his left caught his attention, and he turned to face Roger Sevenfield. Roger was one of Edric Delmar's 2 squires, Titus had only recently met the pair when Dickon had collected him from his father's house. The other squire was Bronn of House Arwell, a strong boy of 10. Both Roger and Bronn had terribly sad pasts, and they had not taken well to Titus and his status as the son of still wealthy parents. Bronn in particular had once lived a life similar to Titus, but his mother had died when he was only 4, and his father had since fallen in love with wine and had taken to gambling away the family's money. Roger was an orphan who had taken to living on the streets and picking pockets to survive. He had tried to steal from Edrik, and had received a beating and a squireship in return. The two boys stood a few feet away from Titus, glowering in turn.
"That's a squire's job there,"
Roger said stiffly, reaching for the brush in Titus's hand.
"I mean to be Dickon's squire by the end of this tournament,"
Titus retorted, drawing the brush close to his chest. Bronn chuckled aloud, grabbing for the brush and speaking through gritted teeth.
"He's no more than a squire himself. If he's good enough to be a knight, he'd be one already."
Titus lost his balance on the stool and went toppling toward the ground. He reached out and took hold of Bronn's leather jerkin, pulling him down as well.
"Get off me!"
he shrieked, swinging his fists wildly. One struck Bronn in the back, while the other caught his own chin. He reeled in the dust, golden flakes of light stinging his vision. Roger laughed heartily, doubling over and holding his belly. Titus gritted his teeth, pointing his finger at Roger.
"Don't laugh at me, alley cat!"
The name was all he could come up with, his wit outracing his pool of insults. The words appeared to sting Roger, and before he knew it, the boy was on top of him. Bronn had scrambled to his feet and now began to kick at Titus, catching him in the back and buttocks. A voice rang over the din of the squire's melee.
"Stop that this instant, in the name of the Seven!"
The 3 wrestling squires halted all movement and looked around to find the source of the voice. Titus was certain they were about to be arrested, but there was something odd about the voice that he could not quite place. It sounded young. It was then that he saw the other boy, about the age of the 3 fighting in the dirt. He was handsome for his age, dressed well in boiled leather and a fine belt around his waist. There was a training sword fastened to the belt. Titus quickly recognized the dull blade in castle-forged steel.
"Who the bloody hell are you?"
Roger spat, jumping to his feet and looking for anything he could use as a weapon. When he could find nothing, he raised his fists as if he meant to box the boy.
"I'm John of House Ruslan, squire to Verric Uros himself. I command you to cease your fighting this instant."
His voice shook slightly, as if he was surprised to hear himself uttering the words. Titus was certain his puzzled expression would not be able to leave for some time. John turned to Titus.
"You, stable boy, to your feet!"
Titus' face flushed.
"Who are you calling stable boy?"
How could anyone mistake him for a commoner? He had been told for most of his life that he had the mark of nobility, something about the state of his eyes and cheeks. Titus was on his feet before he fully realized what was happening. Bronn and Roger had been pushed from his mind, and now his honor was at stake.
"You have no idea who you're talking to,"
he yelled, anger taking over his actions.
"I will not have this foolishness at Sir Verric's tournament. Stop it now, or I'll be forced to stop it for you."
John's voice had become slightly more confident, though his eyes darted between the 3 squires as if he were measuring them up and figuring out his odds in a 3-to-1 engagement. Roger reached his breaking point first.
"Someone needs to teach you to mind your own business."
He nudged Bronn and nodded. The pair of them roared and ran towards John. Titus must have been roaring as well, because he heard his voice among the noise and felt his feet carrying him forward to engage with John. John's instincts were good. His hand flashed to his hip where his sword was fashioned, and it was out before the 3 squires had reached him. For a moment, the birds sang over the melee beyond the pavilions and the melee of the squires. Dickon had not stopped laughing since he had returned to the tent and seen Titus's face. Through his laughing, he managed to ask Titus, "You're telling me the squire of Verric Uros did that to your face?" Titus frowned, nursing the bruise that splashed across his left cheek. The 2 cousins sat beside a fire with Edrik Delmar, who was nursing wounds he had received at the hand of Lyonel Redfield, and his 2 squires, who were nursing wounds in turn. When he had settled down over the squire's melee, Dickon recounted the tale of their own battle, detailing Edric's noble charge and elimination after 4 of Redfield's loyal knights surrounded Edrik, allowing their leader to take the final strike. Dickon had managed to eliminate the knights, but was bested by Lyonel in single combat. Both knights were bitter in their defeat, and would be nursing their wounds for a few days before the tournament festivities continued. There are to be 7 feasts between each of the games, Dickon explained, sinking his teeth into a Cornish hen fresh off the spit of the fire. The hot grease rolled down his chin, but the warrior simply wiped it with the sleeve of his tunic and continued. The next event is the joust, and Edrik and I will be ready to take our place in the lists. This time, Redfield won't have his gang of fairy knights surrounding him.
It wouldn't matter if he did,
Edrik spat, ripping into the thigh of one hen and pulling another off the spit with his other.
I'll kill him and all of his loyal spawn if it's the last thing I ever do.